5, 4, 3. Wait for it to catch up.
Welcome to XL Kaplan Arctic Live. We're here at the UK Arctic Research Station in Ny-Ålesund, the Svalbard. I'm very, very pleased to welcome Nick Cox to Arctic Live, the station manager. Welcome, Nick. Thank you very much for joining us today. We've got a few questions that have been submitted by schools in advance, and we've got a live chat coming up as well. But first, I'd love to know, I know we've been together on the station, and this is the fifth time, I think. When did you start? I mean, how long have you been working in the polar regions?
I first started, this will seem such a long time ago to the people who've got us, watching us here on camera, but I actually started in 1975, so I've been in the Arctic, Antarctic, or both, every year for the past 43 years.
Amazing. And I think what I wanted to do is before we started taking this question, actually, it's just a lot of our students probably haven't been on a trip to the polar regions. Can we just give them a quick sort of look around to show them what the Arctic looks like?
Of course. And maybe worth just saying before we go on that you know, over those 43 years that I've been coming here to the Arctic or down to the Antarctic, things have changed enormously, and access and all these things, it's become very much easier to get here. And you can see I'm not wearing a huge amount of clothing. You know, the bases now are warm, and we have reasonably good food and so on. But, and Jamie and I are just going to go outside now, the big outdoors, the wilderness that's out there, hasn't changed. Or if it has changed, it's perhaps because of global warming and so on. But that, in essence, it's still very wild out there, and as beautiful and as dangerous and all those things as it's ever been.
Well, we'll talk a little bit about the changes and some of the dangers, but we're just going to sort of make sure we don't trip over our leaves and head out. Sorry.
So how far can we see here?
Well, I think if you want to sort of talk a little bit about the view that we could see down the fjord here, and then Ellie will be able to sort of to point the camera at what you're talking about. So if you just describe sort of.
So one thing about the Arctic is it jumps from, it changes throughout the year, in whether it be temperature, air temperature, whether it be the sea temperature, the light levels and so on. And we're going through a big change at the moment. So what you're looking at here now, the Arctic is fairly rapidly changing from its winter guise through to spring, and then rapidly after that comes the summer. So it's been dark here since it was dark from October through to March. And so it's a very big day here on March the 8th, where we see the sun just arriving over that mountain over there for about a minute. And it just shows. So you have to imagine that you've been in complete darkness for all those months, October through to March. Imagine you get out of bed in the morning and it's dark. Breakfast is dark, lunch is dark, dark all afternoon, dark when you go to bed. So it's a very, very big day when the sun appears. And we've gone from there, March the 8th, where it showed for a minute, through to now, where we have 24-hour sunshine. And it has been, up until a few days ago, extremely cold. We've had some really good cold temperature, and that might sound strange, but we actually like the cold. It's good because we can travel on the ice, we can travel on the snow, we can get about. And in a really cold year, this has been a while now, the sea would actually be frozen. But in recent years, that hasn't been happening because of rising temperatures globally. But looking out over there, you can see out there at the head of the field, or the bay, or whatever we want to call it, are some glaciers down at the head of the bay. And they're massive. They're massive glaciers. And they're flowing from the inland ice, where you get an accumulation of snow, snowfall and so on, which is sort of building up layer by layer, and then it's slowly but surely flowing towards the coastline, and then it breaks off as icebergs. And you'll know about icebergs, they're sort of floating around in the sea, and there's only about 1/10 showing on the surface, 9/10 underneath. Very beautiful things. Can you see one up there? Yeah, there's a little one up there. We probably call that a bergy bit, a little berg. And then a bigger one round the corner there with sunshine on it.
And such a scale, Nick, how far is it down to the glaciers at the head there?
We're talking to the snout of the glacier, or the front of the glacier down there, it's 15 kilometres. And then there's very fine mountains beyond, with the sort of crown tops, we call them the 3 crowns. That's 30 kilometres away. Wow. And the glacier straight down the bay here is the fastest moving one in this area called Svalbard, and that's moving at on average about 3 meters every day, and in the summer it goes up to 6 or 7 meters every day. So very rapidly moving, and where it moves, of course, it begins to crack up because it's moving so fast, and we call those things crevasses. You've probably heard of crevasses, and they're probably one of the things that we fear most. When you come to a polar region, there are certain things that make you a little bit nervous, and one of them is falling down a crevasse, because you get these fissures or cracks in the ice, and they can be hundreds of feet, hundreds of meters deep, and they can be anything from that wide, big enough for you to fall into, to they could be 50 meters or 100 meters wide. So you could be travelling into the middle of it and suddenly it collapses and disappears. And in my time in the Antarctic, 10 of us, people I knew, were killed in various accidents, and some of them being falling down crevasses. And it's something that you really fear, because however hard you try, sometimes you don't see a crevasse because it's covered in snow. So we tend to rope up together and try and help each other and pull each other up when we fall in.
Brilliant, Nick. I think we're going to head in a bit, but before we do, I think, Eddie, can we get an external shot of the station? Because this, I think probably since you've been visiting the polar regions, that you've been based at stations for times. Why do we have stations in the polar regions?
Well, there's a few reasons. One is, of course, we need a platform, safe, warm, comfortable, or reasonably comfortable, somewhere we can find a water supply. That could be running meltwater or cutting blocks of snow to make a water supply. But we need electricity. The scientists these days, science is so sophisticated now, the equipment that they use, they need fairly modern facilities, good electricity supply and so on. And it also makes a safer environment. So inside here we have everything from the ropes that I was talking about for glacier travel through to radios. We have rifles and flare pistols to protect ourselves against polar bears. And of course we have computers and so on. So it's a good platform for productive science.
Perfect. Well, let's head back in. I'll go first, and we won't try not to trip over our microphone leads. Now we can keep warm in our station.
Yeah.
So
Nice and cozy.
Close the doors.
Close it.
Let's check to see what questions we've got coming through. This is from Cristina Artero's class in Portugal, asking class 5B, how do you prepare yourself physically or mentally for long periods in the polar regions?
That is a very good question, Christine. That's and one that's not often asked, because I would think it's rather like, I don't know if you play any sport, whether it might be hockey or football, or I'm trying to think of a sport, but you prepare yourself, don't you? You prepare yourself to go onto the field or to do whatever you're doing, and it's something in your mind that you're preparing yourself, and you're preparing yourself physically. And that's very much the case when you come to a polar region. I think it's a mixture of being a bit nervous, You're nervous about leaving your loved ones at home. You're nervous about the success of the expedition when you're here, and you're worried about the safety of the people who are here. So it's a sort of a mixture, and it's a bit like walking onto a games field in many ways. You know, it can go this way, you can get bad weather, you can get good weather, things can happen, and it's ever-changing things. Jamie here knows so well, you know, we try and make a plan what we're going to do, but sticking to it's quite difficult.
The thing is, you always make a plan, and I don't think I've ever managed to stick to a plan. But I think having somewhere, if you don't have a plan, then you're going to come unstuck.
Yes,
pretty quickly.
Yes, you have a sort of the makings of a plan, and bits of it work.
And you've done something called overwintering, which, I mean, must be very tough mentally, especially and with a group of people as well. Maybe if you can explain sort of what overwintering is, and if there is any way that you can prepare yourself for that.
Yes, winter is a special time. It's you're more isolated than probably on planet Earth. A polar winter, you can't get more isolated other than going into space. It's the sea freezes, so ships can't get to you. Very difficult for aircraft to get to you, and in some of the cases when I've wintered, we couldn't get aircraft to us or ships, so we knew we were very much on our own. So yes, the sort of the preparation for a winter, which could be 10 months or so without being able to get out, is a big one. But the biggest thing is getting on with each other, because all sorts of things can happen in a winter. You can run low on food, or you can have people who injure themselves, and all those sort of problems. But probably the biggest problem of all is if people don't get on. And I think that's, and I'm sure you all do, it's one of the things you make this big effort to always get on with each other, because getting on is more important than anything.
We've got a number of questions coming through. These from the experimental high school attached to Beijing Normal University. And the first question is, how much time do you spend here at the UK Arctic Research Station each year? Or maybe how much, in total, how much time have you spent up in Ny-Ålesund?
Well, these years, in recent years, I don't spend quite so. I spend about 3 months of each year up here, but until recently I was spending 5 months of each year up here. And then in my Antarctic days, I think my longest trip was 33 months without going home. So it varies. It varies.
A few months at a time.
A few months at a time, yeah.
Brilliant. And obviously, I mean, questions coming on a bit, and maybe we'll take this one first and then come back to some of the research questions. People asking, what is a station manager? And then how do you become a station manager?
Yeah, very good question. It's a bit like, I don't know if you know the word apprenticeship, where you do a job but you learn as you go along. It's experience, and you learn. And I think the important thing for a station manager, or to become one, is that you just build up enough experience of whatever it might be, from the polar weather to travelling on glaciers to sea ice and all these little things, and experiencing working with scientists who have come along with all sorts of different plans and all sorts of different problems, and eventually you have just enough experience that you really can help them. And I think that's, in many ways, it's not a quick fix becoming a station manager. It's sort of building up enough experience until you're sort of ready to really be in charge or look after everybody. And the other part of the question was
I mean, what is the role of a station manager?
Yeah, I always think of it, it's rather like putting on a play. And you might do plays in your school. I wonder if you do. You know, there's a lot of preparation. You've got to learn your lines, and you've got to learn all the props and where you move on stage and all these things. And you probably spend, I'm guessing, but 80% of the time is preparation, and then the big moment comes and you go on stage and you perform. And that's rather like polar work, I always think. My job entails much of the stage management, really. It's just getting everything ready. And then when scientists come here to work in the polar region up here in the Arctic, then you just hope that it's all going to pull together and work for them.
Because that's the thing, that you will have normally much more polar experience than the scientists coming to work here. So it's sort of allying your polar experience with a science band to make a successful polar research piece.
Absolutely, yeah. It's they know what they want to do, and I know what the problems are, or the possible problems, and more importantly, the dangers. And so it's a sort of, as you say, Jamie, it's a sort of blend of the two, and then we come to a nice compromise and a nice sort of agreement, and hopefully all success.
Perfect. Because a follow-up question from Beijing was, what has been some of the most interesting research that you've supported during your career?
Oh, that's a good question coming from Beijing. We've had one very recently, within a few days, past few days. Fascinating project where they lifted by helicopter a 20-meter long boom which had radar equipment inside it, and they flew it over crevassed areas of a glacier, and were able to measure the depth of the glacier, so 500-meter thick ice and so on. And not only is it useful here in the Arctic, but they're going to take it to the Himalaya and use it to map very difficult crevassed glaciers in the Himalaya. And from that, they're going to be able to work out the water content, which, of course, you know, these glaciers in those parts of the world are melting, and millions of people are relying on them for water supply. But we have, I could tell you of others, but I could go on and on.
Maybe one more example. That's a sort of emerging example, I think.
That's an example. Yeah.
I mean, what about in Antarctica? I mean, you've spent months away with sort of field teams.
Yes. One project where with an oceanographer, where we travelled for 3 months together, and we abseiled on a rope, letting yourself down on a rope, down crevasses, and drilled holes through the bottom of crevasses to try and get to seawater. This was on an ice shelf. And that was all tied into a program looking at ocean currents.
Wow.
So much to learn about the Earth processes. And that was a very exciting and very important project.
Amazing. Thank you. You've had an incredible career, Nick. Did you go to your careers advisor, age whatever, at school and say, I would like to be a polar station manager? You know, what are the steps? And did you ever think that you'd have a career like this when you started out?
Well, I hope to. I mean, at the age of 6 years old, my parents gave me a lovely little book, puffin picture book of polar exploration, children's book, and that was it. 6 years old, and I wanted to go to the Arctic and Antarctic. And yes, the careers officer was very disappointed in me when I said that's what I'd like to do. But isn't it interesting, you know, the people along the path that help and trigger or stimulate your interest. And there was a master at school who'd been in the Antarctic, and he helped me.
How wonderful! I mean, this is questions from, this is Mary from London who's interested in that, and also what you miss the most when you're away.
Oh, is that from Mary?
That's from Mary, yes.
That's a good question, Mary. I think top of the list, of course, is family and friends. And that is the toughest thing about being away. The cold, I'm not wearing much now, but you know, the equipment's good. We can bear the cold. We can bear bad food. We can bear some of the dangers and so on. But I think in those quiet moments, the things that are tough is being away from the people you love most. But, you know, then it makes the homecoming fun as well. So that there's a plus side to that.
Fine.
Good question.
Very good question. We're just going to pop back to Beijing, but we've also got the Bulimba SS Brisbane school in Australia who are going to watch playback because of the time difference. and so we've got some questions from them. But we'll just back to Beijing. So this is the UK Arctic Research Station. In Ny-Ålesund, there are other stations from other countries. What kind of collaboration or interaction does the station or yourself have with those other countries?
Oh, we have very good question. We have good, strong collaboration and great friendship among the stations. And it's like there are 10 nations here in this community, in this settlement, that are carrying out research. So we have China, and we have Italy and France and Germany, India, South Korea, and more. And we work closely. We work independently in some respects, but what we do is we tie together just to be sure that we all benefit from the research that each one's doing. And in many cases, we actually work together. So it's nice because you have the science, but you also have the bonds and the friendship that build up.
I think this year that we're relying on some basic ocean chemistry data coming from the German station. Yeah. And then the Norwegian station is helping with samples, and so it's wonderful.
It's marvelous. It's you know, the science of course is great, but the sort of the international friendship and collaboration is in many ways as good a product, maybe a better product. I'm not sure. It's great.
And just going to Australia briefly, we learned that last year you were awarded the Polar Medal, second-class pure Polar Medal, for outstanding achievement and service to the UK in the field of polar research, as station leader developing an international research community at Ny-Ålesund in the Arctic. This is reading your medal citation.
Wow.
What has been the most challenging part of setting up really this station, this UK station, and being part of the international community here in Ny-Ålesund?
I think, and that's a very great question. I'm very humbled that you saw this thing about my medal. Just a little aside, you have the Polar Medal in Australia, a very beautiful medal. The Polar Medal, which I've seen copies of. It's the most beautiful, beautiful medal that you have. Maybe you'll get one day, so you must work on that. But the most challenging things, I think, again, are not the sort of obvious sort of dangers of being out in difficult places and doing difficult things. Probably the big challenges have been early on was to get sort of out with where we are now, getting organisations in their home countries to sort of understand polar regions. So we're talking now getting to sort of politicians and such like, to get them to understand polar regions and the sensitivities and how the protection they require and so on, and then look for a way to come together internationally and work here. And probably that's been the most challenging thing, I would think.
I mean, because this is one of the ways that we can start to bring the polar regions to other people. And just as a follow-up question to that, what do you think is the most difficult thing for people to understand about the polar regions, for those who haven't been? What do you think is that? Until you've been, you just don't get.
Yes, I think probably the most difficult thing, and certainly was as recently as 5 or 10 years ago, it's changing rapidly. The things that you do, things that Ellie over here are doing, you make it easier because you're actually publicising, making people aware of what's going on up here and the importance of it and so on. But as recently as 5 or 10 years ago, that wasn't quite the case. There was the odd TV programme, and governments took a bit of interest, but you know, not a lot. So we're coming up fast now. They're learning rapidly why these places are so important, the sensitivities of the places.
And do you think that the changing Arctic has put it up the news agenda and then put it up the political agenda as well? That if it had been, you know, relatively stable up here, then there wouldn't be this interest.
No, I think I don't think there would be a huge interest at all. People, you know, they love to see a film of a polar bear and a seal and all these things, but the sort of the more important stuff, perhaps, whether it be global warming or pollutants that are building up here in the ice and in the animals and the fish, I don't think they would get the publicity and public awareness. So it's a success story in many ways, and thanks to the likes of you, because people are becoming more aware, whether it be global warming, pollutants and all these sort of things, and we're all getting on and doing something about it. So I think it's, it's very exciting, and there's nothing like having a problem to actually pull people together. So it might be a worrying thing, global warming, but if there's a plus side, it pulls us all together to get on and do something about it.
Thank you. And that was a challenging piece, was the original question,
yeah,
of convincing decision makers who have this as part of regions to take an interest and to fund and support. What has been the most rewarding thing about setting up the station here?
Oh, the most rewarding thing is seeing people from various nations, lots of nations, living, working, producing together, and that's so exciting. And there's something about being in a difficult climate. We do get cold, we get lonely, we get frightened sometimes, and so on. And it pulls everybody together, and that's uplifting to see people so happy together.
Fantastic. Thank you. I mean, it is. I mean, being here and seeing some of the same faces year in, year out, it just feels very familiar coming up here, and everybody's very supportive. That's fantastic. Continuing from Australia, the wildlife up here. What are some of your favourite wildlife encounters up here on Svalbard?
Well, it's so rich in wildlife up here. There aren't many types of animal, but what they are magnificent and very, very special. And of course, top of the pile, always the polar bear, and they are marvellous. They are marvellous. And then you go down to the little auk, tiny little bird, real polar bird, and they're just beautiful little things. You see them flitting around in flocks over the sea ice and over the bergs and so on. And they're they're all beautiful. But I think when you look at the whole lot, encounters with polar bears are very special. That you don't forget you never forget the first polar bear you see. And I've seen. Tell us the first. Well, the first polar bear, I was in a small boat way up to the north, and I was stuck in sea ice and I couldn't get out. I was stuck in a boat for a week at least, and there were 4 of us on the boat, and a wooden boat, and thankfully the boat was strong enough, and there were ice floes the size of football pitches that were jamming us in and almost crushing the boat, but thankfully she held together. And we were doing best with poles and so on to just try and ease the pressure on it. And eventually we were getting so exhausted, as much as anything, just pushing on bits of ice, that we looked on the chart, or the map, and we saw there was a little bay to the north of us that we thought might be clear of ice, because the currents might have kept it clear. So we walked over the ice floes to the shore, where it would have been, I don't know, half a mile or so, and then we walked over to this bay, and there, we actually found the bay was completely frozen over, but in the middle of the bay was this lovely polar bear, and it had just killed a seal, poor seal, but it was lying there on the snow, and the bear was chewing on it. And like often happens when you see a polar bear, they start yawning and they fall over and go to sleep. And I don't know if any of you have got pet dogs at home, but their capacity for sleep. Dogs can sleep for a very long time. Well, bears, rather the same, big carnivore, and they've got this huge capacity to fall asleep. So quite often when you see a polar bear, they're sleeping. And one of the things we have to be really quite careful about when we're out travelling, doing research and so on, is that you don't wake up a bear that's having a snooze, because they take quite a long time to wake up. And if you wake one up and you're close and you hadn't realised, they can get up and be quite aggressive. There was a poor fellow a few years ago, not from our station, but there was somebody who was killed by a bear that was sleeping. So it's something to be very careful with. So when we're walking along, if you're on your own, you clap your hands, or you whistle, or you sing a song, or the 2 of you, you chat, but you make sure that you make enough noise to to wake up a snoozing or sleeping bear.
Fantastic. And that's. I mean, I think you always give us this wonderful polar bear briefing, safety briefing when we're up here. I think we had the recently awoken grumpy bear.
Yeah.
And then there's the mother and cubs.
Mother and cubs.
And then the old and then the teenagers.
That's the only one I've been really chased by, and it was a mother with a lovely little cuddly cub. You would have loved it. Beautiful little thing. And she just wouldn't have me in the area, and she came at me low and ran at me. And actually I made a lot of noise. I had a rifle. Thankfully I didn't have to use it. I've never used a rifle against a bear. And I made a lot of noise, and the cub ran away, and the mother noticed, I don't know how she did, because she was coming straight at me, but she sensed it and she turned and ran off with the cub, so it was fine. But you're absolutely right, the sleeping bear can be dangerous, mother with cubs can be dangerous, and an old bear, they can be dangerous, and you can tell an old bear because they're rather sort of grey or black around the nose, around the muzzle, and they look a bit gaunt and they're losing body bulk and they get very hungry. And then the other one are young bears that have left their mother, and they stay with the mother for 2 years, and so they can be almost full grown. So you can see a mother bear wandering around with 2 cubs which are almost the same size as her. But when the 2 years is up and the young bears leave, they get hungry, and they get a bit frightened as well. So you have to be a little bit careful with them. A few years ago, there was a tented group just south of here, and a bear ran into the tent and started eating the biscuits, and it was also eating seaweed. It was so hungry, the poor thing. But mostly bears will come and look at you and decide that you're not a seal because you're standing on your feet, and you might be a bit dangerous, and they let you go. They just wander by. But every now and again you get one that's so hungry or frightened, and they're the ones to be careful of. Yeah.
Thank you. There's a very different set of knowledge and skills from most people, which brings us on to another question from Australia. Is what is a typical day in the life of Nick Cox?
Oh wow. One of the lovely things about my job is it can be so varied. In one day I can be briefing, training, I can be taking people out to do crevasse rescue exercises and that sort of thing. I can then find myself with a hammer and nails building a crate to put freight into to send science equipment back. Inevitably, there's time in front of a computer with everything from risk assessments to bookings to things that are going on hundreds and thousands of miles away, documents about Arctic regions and policies and all that sort of carry on. And then the next thing I can find that we've gone and got a, going up a glacier to take a team out to show them a new area, skidoo or on foot. And so it's very, very varied, very varied.
When I switched to Thornleybank Primary School in Scotland, who would like to hear you tell them about the changes that you've observed in the Arctic.
Oh, good, well done. Thornleybank.
Thornleybank.
Oh, how nice.
Thornleybank Primary.
How lovely. Good question. The changes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now they have they're big changes, and I'm trying to put a sort of time span on it, but certainly 15 years ago began to see change, and that warmer temperatures. We never used to get real rain up here. Occasionally in the middle of the summer we get a little drizzle or mizzle, dreek as you might say in your part of the world. We now get proper rain. And that's a big problem, not only because ice gets washed away, but it's also difficult for the wild animals, polar bears and foxes and so on, and the birds, and they don't like to get wet. That is a definite change. The ice is melting fast. We get more insects now than we ever did before. thinking of the other things that are... But the fish, the very animals that are coming up here, we're beginning to get, in recent years, we've had mackerel, which of course you get from the west, the coast of Scotland, but they are a subtropical fish, and we're beginning to see them, not often, but they have appeared up in the Arctic. So, you know, some fairly dramatic changes over the years.
I mean, just things you've pointed out to me over the years is that, for instance, there was a headland opposite, which now it turned out is an island.
Yeah, yeah.
And you've told me about driving a tractor across the fjord that we had a look at.
Yes, yes.
Outside.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yes. I mean, we used to come in the winter. My coldest winter up here, we had -50, and that was a tough old job. We had one fella lost the end of his thumb, another lost his toe, and another lost a bit of his face, and we all got quite badly frostbitten, which we repaired. But those were the days when we got good, solid sea ice. The ice would be a metre thick, and you could drive tractors over it, you could drive skidoos over it, and so on. But as Jamie said, you know, that's changed, and just over the way, across the bay there, there's an island, we call it an island now, called Blomstrand, and that used to be a peninsula, and it was connected by glacier on the other side, but that's all gone now. It's very different.
Landscape has changed in the past sort of 15 years.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, dramatically changed. Yeah.
And we're switching to the Grammar Junior School in Cyprus.
Wow.
Wondering whether they could pop in. How would a school trip visit Svalbard?
Yeah. Now, we could organise it, but with difficulty. It is possible to visit Svalbard because in recent years there's scheduled aircraft service, so you know, no different from you flying to Athens or wherever you wanted to go. But to get that step further out into the sort of wilderness area is difficult. So there's a settlement to the south of us which has an airstrip, and you can fly there. But getting the extra distance into the sort of wilderness areas, which we are, is a little bit more difficult. But we do increasingly over the years encourage the use of Arctic research stations for education. So we later on this year we'll have some university students will be coming as a group to learn about surface radar and be doing some marine science and so on. So yes, we do use it for education, but the actual mechanics of getting a group here is quite difficult. But it is possible, and all I can say is if further down the line anybody ever wanted to, then by all means, whether it be an individual, a career in polar regions, or as a group, it is possible.
But maybe it's when people get to the undergraduate stage, it might be more appropriate.
More appropriate and more likely to happen. Quite a lot of projects get so far and then we hit so many problems, whether they be logistically or financially, and we can't do it. But it's worth trying. But as Jamie said, more likely to be success at a graduate level or undergraduate level.
A follow-up question is from Cyprus. Another one. In terms of saving people's lives, if you were happy to answer that one, in a situation where you've saved lives.
Yeah, it's no, that's a good question. It's we all look after each other, as you do, and I'm sure you know in your schools and so on. You all keep an eye on each other, and whether it's somebody falls over or you're out in busy traffic or whatever, you maybe not even conscious of it, but you do. We all look after each other, and that becomes more exaggerated or becomes perhaps a little bit more important here, because if something does go wrong, it's quite difficult to get people out, and so we're a little bit more careful. But yes, I've had to deal with all sorts of things, from pulling people out that have fallen a long way down crevasses, you know, sort of 20-30 meters down, and we've had to pull them out and give them treatment and then wait until we could get them out to medical care. We've had people who've fallen in the sea, which you don't last long. Sea freezes at minus 1.6 degrees centigrade, so it's intensely cold. So if people fall in the water, they don't last long. And we've had cases where I've had to pull people out of the water and we've resuscitated them, but they've been in a pretty poor way. It's very dangerous to end up in seawater. There have been all sorts, I'm sad to say, but all sorts of other accidents and so on. And one of the things we do have to watch out for, and it's quite difficult in my job, is you have to be so careful that the rescue party don't get into more trouble than the person who is, in danger. And that's something you have to be very careful of, particularly in polar regions, because people go out in a rush to go and save somebody, and actually the rush can be a problem itself. So every rescue has to be very carefully thought through, so we're sure of success.
Thank you. Well, we're gonna switch to Croatia now, and I'm not gonna be able to pronounce this school name, but I'm gonna give it a go, which is Osnovna Škola Vladimir Nazor in Krzyzewski, who would like to know. We did a keeping warm in the Arctic experiment this morning. Where we wrapped different materials around sort of pots of water and see which insulates a bit better. Yeah. But they've got that. They've sort of got that, and also the fact that animals living here have fur and blubber to insulate themselves from the cold. What happens, and this we may have to get one of the science team on this. What happens to those animals if it gets warmer, but they're adapted to live in a cold environment? Have you seen any of the animals sort of have difficulties here because they were adapted to live in this wonderful cold environment, and then maybe it rains or it gets warmer, and that's something that they can't really cope with?
It's very difficult for them, particularly being wet. I think the switch from snow to rain is very, very tough for the animals. And as you say, they've got all these insulated layers. The skin of a polar bear is black. If you look deep in the fur, open it up, it's actually black, and that absorbs heat better than white does. But the fur, of course, is white for camouflage, so that they can hide and creep up on seals, which is the thing that they want to catch. But no, they do get. They're finding that the rain is difficult, and just general high temperature. And they go. I've seen them. They lay out sort of like this on a block of ice, and they'll look at you just sort of like this, wiping the chin on the ice like this, and it's marvelous. But basically, they're just trying to get cool. But the other problem with rain is that it comes down as rainfall, and then freezes, and you get a layer of very hard freshwater ice. So foxes in particular can't dig through the ice to get to their little caches of food which they hid in the summer, because what they do is they catch birds and so on in the summer, and then they hide them in the tundra, which is a vegetation down near the coast, and then it builds up with snow, and you get 1 or 2 meters of snow on top. And in the winter they dig down, they can smell their caches, they've got a very good sense of smell. So they dig down, find their caches, and keeps them going through the winter. Yeah. And they can't get through those layers of ice, so that's tough for them. So there's, the high temperature and rain raises all sorts of problems for them.
And we're just going to go to a final question, Nick, again from Croatia, and this is something that we've alluded to in terms of the changing impact that humans are having on the planet. How do we recycle in the Arctic?
Yeah. Great questions. We take a lot of care. Here at the station here, we have at least 26 categories. I say definitely are some more, but I can't think of them. But there are 26 categories which we sort, and we're diligent and careful to sort them out. And then we have somebody here who does a lot of the sort of packing and reducing volume. And then when the ship comes, which doesn't come very often, but we stockpile it, and the ship comes and takes the waste down south, in our case down to mainland Norway, and there it goes into proper recycled plants and so on. So we're very careful.
Fantastic, fantastic. Well, Nick, I'm afraid that we've come to the end of this live broadcast, but thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for all your wonderful questions. Just to say that we do have 3 more live broadcasts today, 4 more live broadcasts in fact. We have an Ask Me Anything, an open Q&A at 2 o'clock Arctic time. That is getting for, I'm just trying to work that out, what that is, in 9 o'clock on the east coast of the USA. 2 hours after that, we have a live investigation on keeping warm. We're hoping that Nick hasn't been called off somewhere else and we'll be able to answer some questions from the USA later on. And then ending at 8 o'clock Arctic time, we have another Ask Me Anything session. So look forward to seeing you then. But for now, it's goodbye from the Arctic.
Thank you for wonderful questions.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.